everybody. It's Sunday night. The name of the show is Intuitive Inc., and I am still Servette Hassan. Hello, beautiful people. We've got a great show for you tonight. I'm excited for this show. I have two authors on the line. They are married university professors and authors, Manfred Steger and Perle Besserman, who have written a book together. Now, they're both authors in their own right, and they'll tell you about their own books. I'm going to have them at least tell, because if it's anything like this book they've written together, it's fantastic. The name of the book that they've done together is Grassroots Zen, Community and Practice in the 21st Century. And boy, is it insightful and very enlightening, because it takes it to a different level of Zen that I haven't read about before. And I'm really interested in this, and I want to get to them right away. So let's say hello to, we have both of them on the line, Manfred and Perle. Hi. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Wonderful
Thank you.
to be on the show.
Thank you for joining us. And you're calling in from Hawaii, and that's awesome. Yep. Aloha to both of you. Where are you usually in New Jersey? I think you have three places: Melbourne, Australia, right?
Yes, exactly. Most of the time we spend actually in Hawaii, because I teach at the university here. But I would say about 2 to 3 months we're in Melbourne, and about 1 to 2 months on the East Coast. So we really divide our time between these among these three places.
And Europe.
And Europe too. Wow, good.
Yeah, we usually get a month in Europe, because Manfred's family is from Austria.
Oh, well, there you go. So you go and visit. And do you do any workshops in all of these places, or is that just in Hawaii, or just in the East Coast?
No, we don't do anything in Hawaii actually, except work all day long and all night long.
I know that feeling.
Definitely Zen on our own, and do lots of writing and lots of preparation for what we're going to be doing when we go to Princeton and Melbourne, which is where we basically do not just workshops, but we do sessions, which are long retreats. We do meetings, daily meetings with Zen friends of ours.
We give public lectures at bookstores or at other places.
Yeah, we give talks to people who want to hear us, and sometimes people call us up from God knows far away to ask questions. We meet on a weekly basis on Skype with the various Zen friends of ours from Princeton, from Melbourne, Pennsylvania, and we have good friends in Europe who practice Zen, and there's a constant dialogue, a running dialogue going on.
Well, it's wonderful, because you are the founders of the Princeton area Zen group in New Jersey. So we're going to talk about that. First of all, tell me how this all started. How long have you been married?
We've been married almost 30 years now. It's getting very, very close. Next February it'll be 30 years. Well,
congratulations for that. That's awesome. Now, how did you start? Is this the first book you've written together?
No, we actually have written a couple of books together. We started out way back, almost 30 years ago, when we were living in a Zen community here in Honolulu, studying with Robert Aitken, who was an American Zen master, trained by Japanese teachers, and who kind of became a model for us as his students of working with Westerners in a more lay Zen capacity. Because we both had practiced before this with very, very strong samurai-style Japanese monks. I lived in a monastery in Japan for a time. Manfred practiced in Austria with one of the great old Japanese Zen masters who just died at, I think, 107, Sasaki Roshi. And so what we did when we came to Hawaii was kind of have to shed our militaristic, frantic Zen practice that we had picked up among these samurai teachers. And it was hard at first, because we thought there was a little too much softness and too much self-expression. We would have sharing meetings where we were asked our opinions and feelings about things, which was never the case with the Japanese. You open your mouth and you get hit with a stick.
You're in trouble. Yeah.
So basically, we then also published our first book together almost 25 years ago. It was called Crazy Clouds, and it's been just recently reissued in its second edition called Zen Radicals, Rebels, and Reformers, where we really looked at a history of 1,500 years of Zen practice, going all the way back to China and Japan and, of course, the United States. And we were picking out Zen teachers who were unorthodox, who were not necessarily part of the mainstream, but some of them very well known, who were pushing the envelope a little bit in terms of making innovations, working with lay people, and we showed that this idea of a lay practice in a kind of what we now know as an American democratic framework is actually much, much older than, the last few decades here in this country, but really goes back to, believe it or not, to China, where they were referring to it as Grassroots Zen, Cao Ping Chan. And in that sense, we were kind of reconnecting to those Zen teachers who had been engaged with this lay type of practice for a long time.
Wow, that's interesting because, I've studied with, if I opened my mouth it was a Tibetan Zen Buddhist monk, I would have, that would have been it. They would have told me not to come back. So I never spoke the whole time. But I did learn a lot. So I'm liking this grassroots aspect of it because then you wrote that book. So we're going to have you back on the show, you guys, because that sounds fascinating too. But this book, so then you wrote books on your own as well. And
yes,
you left Hawaii and then from there you went to Princeton. Is that right? Or to New Jersey?
That's right. That's right.
Right.
We left Hawaii, and we had already made connections in Princeton with people we knew there who were practicing Zen on their own. And then the thing kind of grew when they invited us to give a talk and a workshop. And that was the first really face-to-face meeting we had with Princeton people who were engaged in or wanted to be engaged with Zen. And when we gave our talk, it became clear that there was a hunger for this kind of Zen, just as much as we had experienced ourselves. And there was a very strong feminist component to this. Actually, one of the books that I went off and wrote on my own is called A New Zen for Women. There was a lot of, as you must know, having practiced yourself, there were a lot of scandals around not only Zen, but most Buddhist teachers and Hindu teachers and Jewish teachers and Christian teachers around women particularly.
Right.
And so when we got there, they saw that we were really peddling a feminist version of Zen. Not only feminist, but totally democratic, egalitarian, lay-centered, meaning not monkish Zen. And Manfred will tell you about how he walked off without the honor, quote, the dubious honor, of becoming a Roshi.
Okay.
Well,
because
basically what I was, what I did not want to do is I did not want to kind of fall into a trap of taking kind of traditional male-oriented Zen transmission and not be aware of the fact that Zen is always changing, it always has changed, it always adapts to its circumstances. And here in the West, it means that the circumstances are not monkish, and they are not necessarily steeped in Asian culture, but actually are should be steeped in our culture, which doesn't mean that I have a problem with the idea of, Zen being very different in Japan or very different in China. I think that's all fine, but it also means that there has to be some flexibility. So instead of becoming a traditional Zen master in the Japanese tradition, I decided to just, together with Perle, start our Zen group in Princeton after we were invited there. And I also was doing my PhD at Rutgers University at the time, so it really worked out very, very well to, do both my intellectual, my academic studies, and then also start the Zen group, which, by the way, is still going very strong. You can find it. You can just Google it. And we still see them at least once a year. And the group, some of the members have been there from the beginning. That's now over 25 years ago.
Wow. Because in the book itself, one of the reasons I like the book is because you are taking it to a different aspect, which is how do we apply this? Because it's one thing to learn the principles or the meditation technique, whatever. It's another to apply it to your daily frantic microwave world kind of thing where people have the attention span of a gnat now, it's which I love. But also when I read in your book, when you started the Princeton group, you purposely set it out to be a shared commitment of meditation practice and friendship, which I found really fascinating. So it wasn't, it's not in this strict tradition of the Chinese or Japanese, but you're taking it and morphing it into something people can understand and apply.
I think that's really important that you mentioned friendship, and that's really a core thing because, as you know, some of the abuses that occurred and still are occurring in the spiritual world very often have to do with the fact that people look at teachers, meditation teachers, spiritual teachers, as beings who kind of are experts on everything, right? They put them on a pedestal. Right. And instead of realizing that teachers are very good at one or two things, which have to do with practicing and teaching meditation, and that's the role that they should be teachers in, people expect them to be experts on everything, on psychology, on people's lives, on family, what have you. And the truth is that most Zen teachers are not, including us. And that means that Zen teachers have to learn from their students who might be experts in all these other fields of social life. And that means you have to have what we call role plurality, meaning different types of roles. We may be the teachers with regard to meditation, but our students have to teach us with regard to all kinds of other aspects of life. So what we're doing is we're growing together in the context of a small group. We are not interested in building large empires. We don't go and create, zendos all over the place. We just stick with one small group of 15 to 25 people, and we consider them not just as our students, but as our teachers. We're friends, and we want to grow together and practice together.
Right.
By the way, this is not new. The old Saupen Chan people did not have hierarchical monastic roles. They were actually a community of friends. Right. They started out during the Chinese Tang period when Buddhism in general was undergoing terrible persecution from the empire, from the emperor. And they had to, basically, they were farmers, they were salespeople, they were teachers, they were ordinary folks. So they weren't monks, and that makes a big difference for us about what it means to be a Zen teacher and a friend and a guide and a learner when you're involved with a group of people who become very close to you. We're still very, very close to the people in our group, which kind of strikes us as odd when we go, for instance, to Europe and talk to friends who go to Zen communities where 100 people show up for one retreat, and the teacher there doesn't know who these people are. Most of them just coming in for one retreat a year and then disappearing. So what we need to do and what we wanted to do, and I think we've been successful in doing, is by keeping it small, maintaining the same spirit as the original Saupen Chan people in China did.
Right.
Teachers, friends at the same time.
Exactly. And you gave an example, I think in the book you talked about how you tried to start a Zendo in Hawaii, actually. And in the beginning, dozens of people showed up. A lot. You barely had room, and the monks that were next to that lived in the temple, I believe, couldn't even come because there was no room for them. But it slowly, you didn't know what to do with that. But then when it dwindled down to 6 or 5, you could help people. You were in a better place to do that. Also, you're referring to that. I'm glad you bring that up because what we're doing in the book is,
we talk about the history of our group and our teaching, but we don't just talk about, the highlights or the successes.
No.
We also talk about what you could consider failures, and actually, as many people know, we learn through failures sometimes even more than through successes. And, we've had our failures. We've had our setbacks. We make mistakes. And one of the mistakes was to try to recreate here in Hawaii what we had in Princeton. And it turns out that it didn't work because we didn't find the people who had the kind of commitment to carry it on. So after a year, that whole effort petered out. And in a way, it brought us back to realizing that sometimes it's really good to learn when things don't happen, when things don't work, because those are the moments where spiritual growth very often really happens.
Well, Buddha said...
as pointed out, everyday life. There is no distinction for us between the Zendo and Zazen and Zen practice and the everyday life that we lead. Because as you pointed out before, every single moment is so precious. Every single moment is a moment that calls our attention to the fact that we're so transient that the next moment might crush us or we might disappear. The funny thing about learning from these mistakes and being in life, we love the expression, to be mature in Zen is to be mature in expression. Not just sitting there in the Zendo being holy and transcendent and feeling great, but going out into the world and having problems. So, you get to learn, for example, that an apple doesn't grow in Hawaii, but a papaya doesn't grow in Princeton. And you get to learn where the proper soil is for what you're doing. You become appropriate in your expression of what you're doing in the Zendo.
Well, Buddha himself said sometimes not getting what you want is the best thing that could happen to you.
Oh, yeah.
So I've always remembered that throughout life. But it's true, and you're very honest in the book, which is what I like. And the honesty is clear. You can feel the sincerity in it. Because you do talk about that kind of stuff. But you're also not afraid to say things like sometimes other types of spirituality or spirituality in general can actually be an obstacle to your clarity. Because you keep striving for things, you keep trying to attain a goal, and it's counterproductive. It's counterintuitive as well. And I love that how you do apply it to the people's lives, because you did talk about a friend of yours. I think she was an artist, and she was in a tornado, I think.
Yeah.
And I loved that because so many people have just gone through Irma and the people in Houston with Harvey, and there's all these things that go on in your life, and for them tremendously uprooting things. And even she found something good in what happened to her as an artist. Can you talk about that a little bit? I like that because this is how you apply your principle of grassroots Zen to things when they do go wrong or not exactly how you thought they would.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is to really cope and come to terms with loss. When you look at say Harvey or Irma, right? People very often say, "I lost everything," as though this is something incredibly unusual and obviously it's horrific. But what we really have to realize is that ultimately all of us are going to lose everything. And what that means is that the flip side of that is that right now we have everything. So in a sense, to be alive and to be in the moment, even if it's a moment of loss, even if it's a moment of sadness, even if it's a moment of learning that you have a severe illness, or learning that your brother is not going to survive, or learning that you've just been fired and you don't know what to do in terms of, because you're too old to retrain. Those are moments that usually, we want to cross out, we want to get rid of, we want to say, hey, this is not it, let's get out of this. But the truth is that those are the moments that remind us that ultimately each one of us is not going to be here anymore. So what does this mean? It means that, again, the flip side, it means that if I'm really, really empty in that sense, I'm also totally open to whatever the moment brings. Mm-hmm. And that emptying out, that being able to let go, the detachment that is practiced in Zen is not something pessimistic or sad. It's actually the capacity to empty out so that you can be fulfilled with whatever the moment brings.
Exactly.
The idea about losing everything, like in a hurricane or a tornado or a natural disaster or a fire, really hits home, because we have a sense that our things are us. You know, we get attached to those things. We, just recently in Hawaii, there was a terrible, terrible fire in a building, in an apartment building, in which we once lived. People called us, actually, from all over the world because they were terrified, thinking that we might still have that apartment. And, you know, just understanding that everything was lost in that building. People died. People can't even go back there to this day because the destruction was so horrific. I really could identify with those people who lost everything in the Florida Keys, where Manfred and I spent vacations. People who lost everything in Harvey, in Texas, where we have dearly, dearly great friends. So seeing what happened right under our own noses in a building where everything we owned was sitting there, you know, it puts it home to you.
Right.
And you get to realize that you own things, but you don't want them to own you. And you really find in Zen, the deeper your practice gets, the more you get rid of things, the more you get rid of things, the more you want to divest yourself of stuff. Strange to say, but you really do. And even when something disappears that you really loved, a book or a photo album or something that's very close to you, your mother's scarf, somehow losing it makes you understand, no, it was not that thing that's gone, because my mother gave it to me, and my mother is not gone. She's here with me all the time without that scarf.
Right, exactly. Right, I love in the beginning when you explain, because Grassroots Zen, the book itself, I think, is, and you say this in the book, is a metaphor for a grassy field. Sort of a gardener's kind of guide for discovering the true nature of yourself, of self. And that's what we're all here, I think, to do, is to kind of discover the true nature of who we really are. And in so doing, we find that place in us where we no longer feel separate, that we're just a part of the bigger whole. And I think the grassy field is what you meant, right?
Exactly. And you know, the interesting thing is that if you look at a grassy field, each blade is distinct and individualistic. You know, it's separate from the other blades. But if you look at the roots, as we all know, very often grass roots are grown together, right? It's very hard to separate them out. They're completely interconnected in their collectivity. So under the truth of individualism, and it is a truth, we all are unique, we all are distinct, we all are precious, we all are individuals, but we also at the same time are interconnected. We can't exist without others, and we can't exist without this wonderful planet, without nature. And you know, if we destroy that socially as well as our natural world, then our individuality and our sense of uniqueness is going to break down as well. So we have to pay equal attention to both sides. The fact that we are precious and individual, and we are separate, but we also are connected and interdependent.
I love that. Yes, it's true. And, you know, I love the way you both talk without kind of talking over each other or under each other. It's now I can see how you wrote a book together. Because as a writer, I don't know that I could write a book with anybody else. But you seem to be symbiotic, which is really nice. I like that, you know, and you have the same thoughts and feelings, and it sort of even though you're deeply individual, you seem to kind of be able to kind of blend that together in an excellent way that makes people understand your points even better. You know, I like it. It's really
well. That's because on the Zen level of things, we're Corsican twins. We breathe the same breath, we eat the same food, but on an individualistic level, we're very, very different, and we have very, very different kinds of personalities. Manfred hates tofu. I love it. I can't stand octopus. He adores it.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
But when we're sitting together and when we're being just who we are, most who we are, then we function as one.
You know,
that's the Zen.
Yeah, you do. The Zen part of it too is when you talk about the rhythm of the bodies. And one of you like to work out at a different time. You had different routines after you work out, so you just changed your schedule, you changed your rhythm, so that you did that together. You figured that out, which is awesome. I think that's great.
You have to figure things out, or else you can't work it out.
Right.
And we have very strong personalities and very strong individualities. But I think that may be another reason that we understand each other so well. You can understand what another very strong person feels like because you know what it feels like for yourself to lose your sovereignty or your sense of dignity. You don't want to hurt the other person in the place that is where you're most vulnerable, too. And I think that's what we need to be when we open up to this practice. You have to really be able to leap over that fear of vulnerability. I used to have a terrible time thinking, that somebody's going to take terrible advantage of me. And in some cases they do, and they did, when I opened myself up and was totally sincere in my wish to practice. But there are times where you make the practice your own, finally, where you can't be shaken. You can't be hurt. Robert Aiken used to say, you're standing on your own 2 feet. And you know it. You know it as well as you know your own breath.
Oh, that's wonderful. Oh, I like that. Yeah, it's a very you structured the book in an interesting way. You did time, space, motion, and aspiration. I liked that because those are the 4 aspects that you were delving into that were most Zen. Correct?
Yeah.
I do, and I like that. The other thing I like too, is I wanted to touch upon is, I wrote this down because people have a really hard time with this, is that the whole practice is based on meditation, and meditation gets a bad rap from a lot of people because they think that, I teach meditation too, different kinds of meditation, but the first thing I hear is most people say, I don't have time. And the second thing, and they wouldn't say I don't have time to brush my teeth. So I don't, I go there with that. You brush your teeth, don't you? So you take a shower every day. So, to me, if I don't meditate by noon, I'm a total wreck.
Right.
I meditate before I put my feet on the ground. The one thing is that they don't have time. The second thing is that they can't get their mind to be clear, and it's impossible to clear your mind. And you talk about that really well in the book. So even if someone doesn't, I want you to talk about it now too, but even if someone doesn't join a group or anything else but is interested in Zen, they would learn a great deal about that just from Grassroots Zen, the book, because you talk a lot about it, which I love. So what do you tell people?
So, I'm glad you bring up this idea, we don't have time for this, we don't have time for that. Because in a way, what's happening now with technology, what's happening with social media, what's happening with, checking your texts and your iPhone, at least once an hour, if not more than that, is that our whole life becomes very much distracted, and it becomes a very kind of a quick cutting up of time into these moments that we very often then put value on and say, okay, this is important because this is for job, or this is what I like, this is what I don't like. And we try to somehow get rid of the moments or not deal with the moments that we feel are not really worth it. And that's really, really terrible because it means that, in a way, you're trying to get rid of part of your life, part of what actually makes you who you are, your moment that allows you to experience things that may not be felt, necessarily as pleasurable, sometimes boring, but they are part of the whole spectrum of human experiences. And if we simply say, well, I don't really have time, meditation is boring, what we are basically saying is that we are not really interested in, or we find certain aspects of the human experience boring. And it's okay to say, I'm bored with it, but I think it's also important to say, okay, let me find out. What is it that makes it boring? Is it me? Is it the moment? And let's investigate that. Let's explore that. And that's what meditation is about. It's focusing on the breath. It's following your breath, coming in, going out, sticking with it, dealing with the fact that you're thinking, then thoughts come and go, and what you realize is that you're living in a dynamic universe, that time changes all the time, moment changes all the time. What you think is the self, my soul, me, is actually a process that's changing all the time. And that recognition, that realization is what brings wisdom.
Exactly.
You know what, Servet? I think something that you just said really struck me, and that is people who think they can read a book, or they might like to meditate, or they do meditate and then it doesn't strike them as something they want to keep doing, and so on and so forth. I would say that comes out of, I think, too much publicity about what mindfulness or meditation will do for you, including make you well, make you beautiful, make you live forever, make you rich, make you a better CEO or whatever. I think that's what Trungpa used to call spiritual materialism, which unfortunately is the driver of so much of what so-called passes for spirituality or meditation.
And have you read that book, Spiritual Materialism? That was written by him. Yeah,
I did.
It was. But you say in your book too, and I like this part. I wrote it down. You said spirituality can be an obstacle to clarity, and I thought, oh yes, because I have all these people who 10 years ago, when it first came out, watched The Secret 150 times and then would call me and say, well, how come my life hasn't changed? And I was like, okay, that's not how it works. But that kind of thing. And it's true. It is true that, and also transformation doesn't happen like that. It doesn't. It's a shift in consciousness, but it comes by itself. It's not,
that's right.
It's not something you go get. It's something you let. And it's really hard to get people to see that. And Zen is very much about that. It's not about getting anything, No,
it isn't about getting anything. That's one of the reasons it's so unpopular today, because one of the great Roshis that I knew, a Japanese Roshi named Soen Roshi, who used to tell people when they came, hey, you're not going to really like this. Zen is most boring and most painful. Because you have to sit there with your legs crossed for 25 minutes. The fact is that people come there to get a hit, a buzz, a boyfriend. I mean, there are a lot of funny reasons that people came to Zen. But one of the things that stuck with me, and I guess still sticks with me, is what the Buddha talked about when he said, it's really got to do with having your hair on fire. It's like being struck by an arrow and not having the time to ask who threw the arrow, how am I going to get it out? You've got to get that arrow out right away. And for me, it comes in the form of a deep existential question that for me started very early in my life, for Manfred started very early in his life. And usually it's those people who have a driving need to go through this experience, to answer that question, who am I, what is death, what is suffering? The Buddha had asked that in order to, and sit for so many years to discover what it was and why it was.
Why am I here? All of those things. Exactly. What is
when
death?
He said, do it yourself. I can't do it for you.
Right.
That's what people don't like. They want you to do it for them.
Well, they want a magic pill. That's what they want. They want to watch it. They want to be able to, well, if I sat and meditated for a week, how come I don't have the new BMW? And I'm like, well, You have to, you know, there's a long, involved process to that. But that's what they're looking for. I think more and more people are coming to understand it doesn't quite work that way. But you know, the getting part is not striving, and all of that is what actually pushes things away. And when you do a practice like Zen, actually it's more powerful than anything else, because if you just allow, it happens much faster, actually, because there is no time. And then it's you know, that's the key, actually. The other key, which you talk about, is attention, and that's key as well. But before we go there, I'm going to open the lines. We're running out of time. That's why I said we're going to have you here many more times to talk about this, especially you, Perle. No offense, Manfred, but I'd love to talk to you about the feminist part of all of this in that book that you wrote yourself, because that just is my own interest, my own. But this book is called Grassroots Zen, and it's Perle Besserman and Manfred Steger. And how do they find this? Do you guys have a website?
Yes, we actually, the best website is either Perle's website, and she can give you the...
Oh,
okay.
Mine is www.perlebesserman.net.
Okay, you're going to have to spell Perle Besserman, because Perle is not spelled like a pearl jewelry.
Oh, yeah, that's right. It's these all lowercase letters. PerleBesserman.
.com, correct?
.net.
.net. Okay, sorry, .net. There, I'm glad I asked. And on that website, they can find many things, I'm sure, and also Grassroots Zen, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and the other one where you can find the book is our publisher is called Monkfish, interestingly enough, since we're talking so much about not monks in. And that's www. Yeah, three W's, .monkfishpublishing, one word, monkfishpublishing.com.
Right.
And even more important, the Princeton area Zen group number website.
Princeton Zen. .org.
PrincetonZen.org. Good.
Right.
Good. And can people join, or does the group have to, do you want the group to stay small, or are there many groups now? How is that working?
People can join. You know, we are always between 15 and 25 people, because what happens usually is that people join, and after a few weeks, a lot of people simply, you know, don't feel like they want to make the commitment, so they disappear, which is perfectly fine. Hopefully they find, you know, something else. And we usually fluctuate between 15 to 25 people. So if people want to come, there's on the website a contact information, and they can just send an email, and they'll get an answer.
Wonderful. Okay, and now I'm going to open the lines if anybody, because we are down to like 15 minutes here. But if anybody has a quick question, and that's my fault because I just got engrossed with the conversation. But if anybody has a question, please call in 949-313-8880. We're on the line with Perle Besserman and Manfred Steger, and they've written a book called Grassroots Zen, and they are experts on this subject, and they've taken it to a different level for people to just lay people to understand and to incorporate it into their busy lives. And this is, I love that, because that's what it's all about, and how to be in those moments where you can find that fine line between dharma and karma and paying attention. Oh, and there's a cone that you use that I love, that you asked, was one of the single most important. It was, what is the sharpest sword?
Right.
I loved that, because that's a cone. Which, explain what that is to people.
Yes, a koan is very often it's mistranslated as riddle. It's not a riddle. A koan is usually a very, very short story, an exchange between usually a teacher and a student, where a question is being asked that has kind of like paradox. It sounds very often very paradoxical, or as Perle said, a deep existential question. So one of the very famous koans, it is, what is the sound of a single hand? right? Usually when you think of a sound, you think about, clapping of two hands, but there's a koan that says, what is the sound of a single hand? Another very famous koan is, who is hearing? Who is the one who hears, right? And then students have to present to the teacher what they think the response is, and the teacher usually says, no, I don't think so. Go back to your meditation. And, that process can go on for a very, very long time until the student typically has an experience of insight, sometimes referred to as enlightenment experience or as Kensho experience, insight experience. And that allows the student then to answer this question in a way that is really not just a superficial response on a dualistic level, but a response that is actually a existential response. So
right, I'll tell you what mine was that really got me. Many years ago. I mean, this was a long, like maybe 30 years ago, and it was the monk said, "Imagine there's a goose inside of a glass bottle, and how do you get the goose out
without breaking the bottle?"
Right, that was mine. So it took me a while. Trust me, it took me a while to figure out that he'd said, "Imagine there's a goose," because there was no goose in the bottle. But so that I totally get it. But that really changed me. I mean, that is true when you start to think. So, what is the sharpest sword? Is the one that you use in the book, and I think that's good because it brings you back to the moment, to the now, which is
that's right.
is an excellent way to do that. There's all kinds of other tips like that in this book, Grassroots Zen. So I highly recommend it to people, and to purchase the book, but also to look on your website and if you have any interest in Zen, because this puts it in a different perspective. You can have time. You can do this and have a good spiritual practice without monks and hierarchy and all these other things you were talking about. You brought it down to the grassroots level, and I like that.
Thank you.
I do like that. I think it's awesome. I wanted to talk about one other thing. I will say if somebody wants to still call in, you have a few minutes. If you have a quick question, 949-313-8880. Other than that, I wanted to just talk about attention, because it is about that in the end.
Right. And, attention, it sounds a little militaristic. Very often when people hear attention, they think, oh, well, I have to stand at attention and something bad is coming. But that's not the kind of attention that Zen is really referring to. It's got to do really with opening up. I like actually opening up more than attention, because what it does is it means that you open up to the present moment and you're not interfering with some sort of preconceived notion or some sort of desire that takes you away from that. I don't want to be here. I don't really like this. I don't really feel like this is working out. And rather than doing that, you just pay attention to what's happening right now, including your sense of dislike, if that's what you're feeling.
Right.
And by paying attention to it, really you're beginning to become much less conceptual and much more directly involved.
I'm going to turn it around and put it in a very positive way, and in a way I think that all of us can relate to. Being in love, finding a baby or looking at a baby, your baby or somebody else's baby, for the first time, you can't not pay attention, because the attention at that point is united with the feeling of love. You can't take your eyes off. You can't take your mind off. When you feel absolutely struck by the sight of your lover coming out of a car after work, and you go down the path, you can't see anything else because your attention is so fixed on your lover walking up the path. And it's that same kind of attention, I guess, if you're really, really in with Zen, that same kind of attention that comes up when you're chopping a carrot. You can't think of anything else. You can't pay attention to anything else. The sensation of that carrot under the knife in your hand is everything there is in the universe at that moment. The same thing listening to the opening bars of a Beethoven symphony. You can't pay attention to anything else because you're swept up into that moment of Beethoven. And that's what really attention is. And the more that you leverage into your everyday situations, the more full and beautiful your life becomes. So don't think of Zen as boring, because attention is never boring when it's full.
No, that's right. And you talk about too that you I like the way you put that. It's you say in the book, accepting the moment, rather than saying that, say caring for the moment. And it's true, because when you care for the moment, it's different than just accepting it or paying attention. It's like you're in it that much. And it's a place you go. I remember once somebody I loved, a man, gave me a card, and he'd written in it, and we hadn't been together very long, and we'd just fallen in love. And I was so engrossed in reading this letter he'd given me on my way out the door that the train came. It was in San Francisco, so the BART came and the BART left, and I didn't even know.
That's it.
And I was like, wow, I just had that moment. And I never forgot that, because I wanted to feel that with other things. And then once I had experienced it, I knew what it was like. Because seriously, I really didn't know. There was nobody on the platform except me. And I thought, what happened? Where did everybody? But that's the feeling. That's it, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, that's it. And I liked the caring for the moment, because really all we have is right now. And here in America especially, a lot of people spend a lot of time from a very young age. Oh, well, when I'm grown up, I'll do that. Oh, when I just get out of high school, I'll do that. Oh, when I finish college, I can have a better job. And oh, when I get married. It's always like in the future somewhere. It's that.
It's literally, the carrot that's dangling in front of you that you never really get, and you're always kind of focused on the carrot, and what you're forgetting is, again, going back to our grass here, the green grass beneath your feet, that's always there. And the carrot, it's nice, and obviously we all want to reach certain goals. There's nothing wrong with it. But if it becomes something that we are chasing after, always anew, without appreciating where we are right now, then there's no fulfillment in that.
I would like to throw in something here that you talked about, when we grow up, when we're going from college. I would like to talk about what's happening to kids' attention, quote, and attention span as a result of all this electronic stuff that's mediating their lives. They're not even in their lives. They're so fixed. And that's not real attention. That's kind of transport or trance or hypnotic state. You look at them when they're looking at these things, these games or whatever it is they're staring at on the screen, and you see that their eyes are glazed over. And I'm sure if you really look closer, they'd be dilated like people when under the effect of drugs. It's the opposite of the kind of attention we're talking about.
Right.
Not being sucked in by something out there that's mediating or actually ruling your attention.
Well,
this is coming from yourself. This attention is yours, only yours, and nobody's mediating it for you.
Right. And I just watched something on the news this morning with a psychology professor somewhere, I can't remember where, but she's doing a study and written a book that teenagers now are becoming socially inept, and they're not prepared for adulthood. They're dating less. They're not sleeping as much. They're not as smart as teenagers. And she's done a long study over many, many years. And this next generation is way behind the game because they're not living. They're just looking at a screen.
Right.
It's
exactly.
changing.
The whole life becomes mediated by a screen, whether you're in the gym, whether you're in your office, whether you're on your iPhone, whether you are, even in your car. Your car is now becoming a screen. And so in a way, all you do you live a mediated life. You don't live the immediacy of the moment,
Right, you don't. And you can't live, even, I was guilty of that too, because I remember thinking, when I just grow up, and I missed so much because I was in such a hurry to grow up that, I was never happy with what was right in front of me. And I had plenty that I could have really, sucked in and put in my bones, that was lovely.
We're a kid again.
Mm-hmm. Well, Oscar Wilde said youth is wasted on the young. He's right. So, yeah. Well, it's amazing. Now, nobody called in, but that's because 900 people are going to have questions tomorrow and ask. Is there any way they can reach you, or is it strictly by the book and they'll find answers, or are you out and about? Are you available?
Why don't they, if anybody's interested, why don't they contact me on the comments section in my website?
Okay, and that again is perlebesserman.com. .net.
Perlebesserman.net.
Right, and it's Perle Besserman.net. Right. Now, are you two writing another book? We're just about out of time, so I'm curious. What's the next phase for you? Have you gone that far?
Not yet. At this point, what we basically said, we pretty much said what we had to say, and there comes a time, if you pardon my language, where you just, it's good to shut up too, and sit there and let things ripen a little, and if the moment moves us, if something comes up, I'm sure we'll do it again. But right now, we're actually quite happy.
I'm a fiction writer, so I've been writing lots of short stories. I have a couple coming out, and I have a novel coming out in 2018. And Manfred is working on another book about globalization. He's one of the world's experts on globalization. So he's very busy with his own professional career, and I'm busy with mine. But, the moment might change. Something might be percolating right now that we're not even aware of. Mm-hmm. And we'll take it when it comes, when it calls us.
Right.
And we won't try to push anything.
No, that's exactly how people should be. I mean, that's very Zen. I mean, because really, honestly, the goal, I think we get wrapped up so much in, like I said, getting instead of letting. And really, transformation does happen by itself. If you allow it to happen, but it comes out because you shift your consciousness and you're in that pure state of the now. And then things come up that you may not have imagined could come up, and that are even better than what you could have possibly conceived, because you're just striving and trying and doing and being. Sometimes it pays to, as you said, Manfred, just shut up and be, and just be. Yeah. And when you can just be, magic happens. It really is. It's amazing how that works. I love the book. I love your work. I love what you're doing. You're both wonderful people, and I highly recommend it to people. Again, it's called Grassroots Zen, Community and Practice in the 21st Century, and that's exactly what it is, exactly what the title says. I appreciate you being with me on a Sunday night, taking your time away from your busy schedules, and thank you, and I hope I get a chance to talk to one of you, both of you, or all of you again.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
And be well.
I will, and you too. Be well. Take care. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. What a great interview that was. They're wonderful people. Grassroots Zen. You can get it. You can find out about it you can get it on Amazon and all kinds of other places, but it's Perle Besserman, PerleBesserman.net, or the publisher is Monkfish, so it's monkfishbookpublishing.com, and it's monk like a monk, MONK, fish, like a fish, bookpublishing.com. It's on there as well. My website is servethassan.com, servethassan.com. We're starting a new direction at the beginning of the year or shortly after the beginning of the year. So there's not a lot of new stuff going on right now, but that's because we're shutting up, as we talked about with these beautiful Zen masters we just had on the show. Because when you do that and you be still, other things come out of that. So I'm working on quite a few other projects right now. And so that's a good thing, and you'll find out all about them, but you can still find out about me and what the few things I am doing right now at servethassan.com, servethassan.com. You can also email me at servethassan.com if you have any comments, any questions, you want to find out about my private consultations, etc. I'll start up the blog again shortly after the first of the year. We're going to do some webinars and things like that. I've got some, it's a different direction, so I think that's going to be fun and interesting and exciting. And in the meantime, sometimes we just need time to get that together. So that's what's happening right now. And what else can I say? Next week we have Frances Greenspan, who has been on the show before. She's our resident animal communicator, and we are going to be talking about animals that have passed on to the other side. So if you want to connect, she has a way of doing that, and we are going to take callers, questions, and she can help you connect her, and we're going to discuss what happens to the pets and the loves, our little furry friends, our little furry families or feathered families members, and where they go, what happens in the spiritual aspect of all of that. So please tune in next week. And then the only other thing is I'm going to say is what I always say every week, which is be you to the full. We talked a lot. That's what Zen is, actually. It helps you to become your true self and find the nature of your true self. Like a lot of other spiritual practices, but this one in Grassroots kind of takes it down to the nitty-gritty. Grassroots Zen does, but it's all about finding out who you truly are, because when you do that, things come naturally and easily and effortlessly, because you're not striving and doing and trying to grasp and get and, push and that goal. It's got to be that. It's got to be that man. It's got to be that job. It's got to be that career. It's got to be whatever. You stop that and you just sort of relax into it, because you're being who you really are. Things evolve all by themselves, and that's kind of the natural Zen way, but it's also much more spiritual, and you will find that when you find out who you truly are, you are at peace too. And, things still go wrong, but you're not nearly as put out by them, and you sort of flow, you get in the flow of the universe, and things just sort of move more quickly, even when there are obstacles. It's just more of a natural progression and a natural evolution of your own soul as you pass along that. So be you to the full. That's what's really, truly beautiful. And tune in again next week. I love you all. Thank you so much for being with me tonight. Good night.